Hello, I'm Mac, at least for a day, and everything's going to be okay. This will be my review of Joan is Awful, an episode of Black Mirror in Black Mirror Season 6. Regular spoiler warning, I'm going to go through the entire plot of the Joan is Awful episode, so it's going to spoil everything that happens in the episode. So if you don't want spoilers, make sure you watch the episode first. Okay, so Joan is Awful, in my opinion, is a masterpiece. It is like perfection of everything that a Black Mirror episode should have. Now, I know some people won't agree with me on that because it is a comedy in like the original sense of a comedy where it has a happy ending, which I'm already spoiling it. It has a happy ending. I know a lot of people want Black Mirror episodes to be dark. There's kind of some dark stuff in here, but it's all kind of it, it's not really dark. It's very much a comedy. I mean, bad things happen because there has to be conflict, but it's pretty much a comedy. And in the truest sense of the word, it's a comedy in that it has a happy ending. Just like a tragedy is, that has a bad ending. And that doesn't mean that I like it because it has a happy ending. I really liked uh Lock Henry, which I reviewed in my previous video, and it was very, very tragic at the end, and I really, really liked that. My criteria for Black Mirror is that, well, if it has all these things, it's like perfect for me. If it's sci-fi, I really like sci-fi, and I think Black Mirror should be sci-fi. And specifically, it uses technology that we have in our modern day, but is somewhat advanced and shows how it can make society worse as it advances. And of course, it is social commentary in that way, that it's commenting on how technology is affecting our society and how it could get worse as the technology progresses. And Joan is Awful does exactly that. Plus, it's just a really enjoyable show with all kinds of twists and crazy stuff happening. So let's go through the let's go through the plot. So at the beginning of the episode, Joan wakes up. Her smartphone alarm wakes her up. She gets up out of bed. She has someone next to her. You don't really see who it is yet. They don't really show. I mean, it's not like they're hiding or anything, but basically she has a boyfriend. We find out later it's her boyfriend that's living with her. She goes and brushes her teeth and she goes and eats breakfast, and her boyfriend makes her breakfast and puts scrambled eggs on her plate, and she's like, yum. Um, and she goes to work and she listens to some kind of raunchy rap music, with like, yeah, and kind of sings along to it. And she goes to like this really, really stereotypical modern corporate campus. Not like the old stereotypical corporate campus where everybody's in a cubicle. It's the new modern office space where everything's open air and there's glass windows everywhere and there's like greenery and comfy chairs for people to sit in. Everybody's chatting and friendly and collaborating. It's like it's the almost dystopian happy office environment that is designed specifically to make, really productive um office workers and everything. I mean, it looks like a great place to work, but at the same time it's kind of dystopian in that that's the way offices are designed nowadays, to make people more productive. Because cubicles weren't working. It was horrible. So anyway, so she has a pretty nice office, like a separate office to herself. Of course, it's all glass walls. Like that style of offices, and she's drinking some coffee, and her like secretary guy comes in and asks her how she likes the coffee, and she's like, if I'm being honest, and he's like, okay, I'll get the coffee machine looked at, and she's like, oh, thank you. Because obviously she did not like the coffee. And then he said, okay, you've got your appointment with at this point in time. She's like, oh no. And she's like dreading this meeting. And so this other woman, later is in her office, and Joan has to tell her that um that the company's letting her go, and she's like, what, they're firing me? But or well, she doesn't say they are, she says you are, because basically Joan is the middleman, and she explains this in this scene, is that she's basically the middleman between the corporate overlords, and when they tell her to fire someone, she has to fire them, and so she's the one that looks bad instead of them. um and the lady's like, but I'm almost done with my sound compression algorithm. And Joan says, yeah, that's something they're not interested in anymore. And the lady's like, but without you're going to need more and more servers, and that's just going to be even a larger carbon footprint, and you're going to, fail all of your environmental promises or whatever. And Joan's like, yeah, I'm sorry, this is what they told me. And the lady she's firing starts to freak out, so Joan kind of walks out, and the secretary guy says, I called in security. And Joan's like, oh. And Joan's like feeling really bad, like she does not relish this at all. She feels really bad that she had to fire her. So the security guy comes and escorts the lady out. And then later, Joan is out on kind of a balcony landing area, and she's like smoking an e-cigarette, a vaping thing. And she accidentally drops it. She's like on her phone, she accidentally drops it, and the lady that she fired carrying her box, it just happens to be walking under her, and the e-cigarette bonks her on the head, and she looks up at her, and with like, you know like uh, she basically thinks that Joan threw it on her on purpose, and she walks away, and Joan curses because she feels even more bad now, because the lady thinks that she just threw the e-cigarette at her on purpose. um so then, oh yeah, so during this time she keeps getting texts from her, as we find out, her former boyfriend, and she's been ignoring them. He keeps saying, she looks at her phone and it says like, I want to see you tonight and stuff like that, and she ignores it. So then after work she goes to her psychiatrist, and her psychiatrist asks her, how are you doing? And she's like, you know my job is nice, but I'm basically just the middleman between the corporate overlords and the other people. Um and then the psychiatrist asks her if she likes her coffee, and she's like, no, I do not like my coffee. And I don't like the coffee at my work either. And then she mentions that I always dreamed of starting my own coffee shop, but she doesn't really talk anymore about that. And then psychiatrist asks her, how is your relationship going? And she names her boyfriend. She says Chris. She said Chris is really nice. He's a really nice guy. He's just kind of vanilla. He cooks, and his cooking is just so bland. And when I eat it, I just kind of go, even though she doesn't really like it, basically. Um, and then she starts to talk about her former boyfriend, Mac, and the psychiatrist reminds her, yeah, but you two, it was horrible, right? And she said, yeah, we fought a lot near the end, but before it was so exciting, all the sex and all this stuff. Um, but the psychiatrist insists, but yeah, he was really bad for you. And she's like, yeah, he was. He was horrible. Yeah, I'm so glad we broke up. Um, and I think the scene ends there, and then very important. At the end, um Joan says to her psychiatrist, sometimes, how you talk about your life story, sometimes I feel like I'm not the main character of my life story. And so her psychiatrist is like, and you would like to change that? And she's like, yeah. So after the psychiatrist appointment, she decides she gets on her phone. She's gotten more texts from Mac. Unfortunately, her boyfriend is her ex-boyfriend not the good one. Krish is the current nice boyfriend. Mac is her ex-boyfriend, and unfortunately, we just happen to share names. Not that Mac is my real name, but um, so she decides to go out with him. She texts him back and goes to, a restaurant, and they just have drinks, and he's like flirting with her, telling her how hot she is, and she's like, I didn't come here for that. I just came here because you wanted to talk to me. And he keeps flirting with her and saying, well, I'm just gonna be here for 5 days. You could come to my apartment. And basically he just wants to sleep with her for 5 days, and then he'll leave again. And she's like, no, no, I love Krish. And he can tell that she doesn't sound serious about that, and he's like, oh yeah, it sounds like you really love him. And she's like, no, I can't leave Krish. And he leans in, he's like, no, you can't leave Krish. And they start kissing, and then finally she pushes away, and she's like, no, I can't do this, I shouldn't have come here. And she gets her purse and she leaves. So then later that evening, she's back home. Krish notices, she kisses Krish, and he's cooked food. um and he kisses her, she kisses him, and he notices there's alcohol on her breath, and she's like, yeah, I just went to a goodbye party. um and he gives her some, he has her taste some of the food, and she just goes, is that salt? Like, it's like that's the only seasoning he uses, is the most basic seasoning, salt. So they're eating in front of the TV, and they're on Streamberry. Streamberry is the parody version of Netflix, that was in Loch Henry. Oh, and and I didn't notice this when I first saw it, because I saw this episode before I saw Loch Henry. Loch Henry is one of the shows on Streamberry. Like uh, they consider that, and Chris is like, no, I can't stand another true crime documentary. And so that confirms that those two episodes are in the same universe. So Loch Henry and uh Joan is Awful are in a shared universe. Don't get me started on how they've kind of messed up the shared universe thing in this season, but at least these two episodes, the best two episodes, are in a shared universe. Um, so they find a show called Joan is Awful, and the actress for it is a famous actress they name called Salma Hayek, and she's a real famous actress in real life too. But her hair is exactly like Joan, and of course it's called Joan is Awful. And Joan is like, Joan is awful, why does she look like me? And Krish really wants to watch it, and she's like, no, we're not going to watch a show called Joan is Awful. But Krish insists, and so they push play on it, and it starts with Joan waking up to her smartphone alarm, getting up, kissing her boyfriend, which looks suspiciously like Krish. And then she goes and has breakfast, and Krish has made her breakfast. The boyfriend, and she looks at her phone and doesn't show what is on her phone to Krish, which we know it's Mac texting her. And so basically, and of course, Joan is starting to freak out and is like, this is exactly what I did this morning. And Krish realizes that too. He's like, wow, this is creepy. It looks exactly like you. And then it shows the actress Salma Hayek driving to work and singing to the same exact raunchy rap song. And Joan is really starting to freak out, because Chris doesn't know this part, but she knows it's real, and pulls up to the exact same company that Joan works at. And then the whole thing plays out. She's got a secretary guy, but everything starts to be a little more dramatized, a little bit worse than it is in real life. So her secretary asks her um how her coffee is, and instead of like just implying that it's bad, she like curses and says that it's horrible. And then when they call in the lady that she has to fire, she's like really mean about it. She's like, you know what, your your audio compression algorithm is vaporware. We don't need that. And the girl's like, but um your carbon footprint, and you'll just have to buy more servers. And she's like, I don't want to hear it, not relevant. And then she starts to cry, and she goes out and she's like, call security and get her out of here. So it's like a really mean version of her. And like everybody else is watching this, it's an actual thing. It's not like some kind of magic thing, it's an actual show. And all the other people that she's seen that day start to watch it, and like the lady she fired is like, yeah, that's exactly how she is. And it's kind of like how when you embellish a story, if you tell a story from your perspective, like you'll make yourself sound good, but if somebody else is talking about you and they want to make you look bad, they'll embellish it to where you were much worse than you actually acted. So yeah, it's a dramatized, embellished version of her life. And then when the employee that she fires is walking out of the place, the Selma Hayek version of Joan purposefully throws the e-cigarette down on her head. And then at this point, Joan in real life is having a panic attack. And she's like, no, no, this can't be happening. And then she realized, oh no, Mac is going to, and like not Mac, Krish. Krish notices on the show that Mac has been texting her. Like she looks at her phone, and he sees the Mac text, and he's like, has Mac been texting you? And she's like, no. um and then she goes to the psychiatrist, and that's when she's like, oh no, I have to stop this. So she tries to grab the remote from Krish, but Krish refuses because he wants to see it. And so she tries to turn the TV off, but there's no button on the TV. And it gets to the part where the psychiatrist asks her, um how was your relationship with Krish? And she says, oh well, he's just kind of, and of course the dramatized version is like, oh, he's just so vanilla and he just makes the worst, blandest food. um and of course Krish is very hurt by this, and he looks down at the food that he made, and he realizes that that's how Joan actually feels about him. So the Krish goes to the bedroom and starts packing up to leave. Joan's like, no, I didn't really say those things. And he said, oh yeah, well, what did you say? And Joan can't answer because it's true, she really did say that. So he packs up his stuff, he gets in the car, and Joan is like begging him to stay. And she said, it's not true, it's all made up. Well, on their way out, he sees the part where she kisses Mac in the restaurant. And so he's really getting in the car and leaving, and she's like, no, it's not true, it didn't happen. And then he says, well, then show me your phone, because in the show you were texting Mac. And Joan is like, it's in the house. And he's like, well, that's convenient. And he drives away. And she goes back into the house, and the exact same thing that just happened is happening on the show. Selma Hayek is trying to get um, the Krish boyfriend that she has on the TV show not to leave. And the boyfriend's like, no, you're awful. Everybody's right, you're awful. And he drives away. And that's like the end of the show. But of course, Joan is still like crying because her boyfriend left her, because a show is exactly like her real life and it doesn't make any sense. And then the next day she goes into work and finds out that she's fired because um uh she basically broke NTA. She broke NDA, non-disclosure agreement, because on the show she talked about the whole um you know carbon footprint. They're firing the lady with the compression algorithm, so they'll have to get more servers and so on. So that's basically breaking NDA, and so now she's fired. So she's like, great. So she leaves and she's fired, and um she goes home that night, and it's the exact same thing on the TV show. And the next day she goes to her lawyer to try and figure out some way to fix this. And so she's sitting with her lawyer, and the lawyer's like, uh unfortunately you agreed to all this. And she's like, what? I didn't agree to this. And her lawyer has like this giant ream of paper on a clipboard. And she's like, yes, you did. And she shows this to her and she's like, what? I've never seen this before. And she said, yes, you agreed to it. It's the terms and conditions whenever you signed up to Streamberry and you clicked agree. And she's like, what? And she said, yeah, there's something in there about how that they can use data from your life in order to create series and stuff. And she's like, yeah, but um like how could they possibly know what's actually going on? And she said, I don't know, it's some kind of quantum computer deep fake mumbo jumbo stuff, and it's not really Selma Hayek. The whole thing is like computer generated CGI, and they could make you do anything they want. And yeah, there's nothing. And she's like, no, they have I have to be able to sue them for slander because they made it a lot worse than I actually am. And she said, no, there's something in the terms and conditions about um making dramatization and extra dialogue and stuff. And like there's literally, and she's like, there's only so many ways I can tell you that there's absolutely nothing we can do about this. And so Joan freaks out and is cursing and leaves. And so out of desperation for somebody to talk to, she goes to Mac's apartment because he offered to spend time with her because Chris broke up with her and she has nowhere else to go. And she comes in, she kisses Mac, and she basically throws herself at him. And Mac, before she came in, Mac was watching the show, and so he was watching her talk to the lawyer, well, watching the Selma Hayek version of her talking to the lawyer. And yeah, and so he pauses that. And so they get into bed, and Selma Hayek is just, or Joan is throwing herself at Mac, but then suddenly Mac stops. He's like, I don't want to do this. This is too public. And Joan is like, what? We're alone in here. I said, yeah, but it's going to be on the TV show. I don't want everyone to see this. Um, and Joan gets mad and she's like, he says, I didn't agree to my life, I'd becoming a public figure. And she's like, neither did I. And he's like, yes, you do. I saw it on the show. It's the terms and conditions. And so she gets mad and goes out of the room. And she goes to his TV and turns it on. And they're at the part where, they're talking about Selma Hayek. And, well, no, on the TV version, the actress playing her is Cate Blanchett. So on the TV show, Selma Hayek is playing Joan, and Cate Blanchett is some other actress that is playing the Joan in that TV show version. And so she's talking about, yeah, but Cate Blanchett must hate this, right? Um, and then Joan gets the idea. She's like eating some fries that are on the table, and she gets an idea of something that she can do. So the next day, she gets a whole bunch of burgers from some burger joint. She eats a ton of burgers, she forces them down, and then she drinks a bunch of laxative. And then she gets dressed in a cheerleader outfit, goes to a church where there's a wedding going on. She walks down the aisle just as like the bride and groom are saying their vows. And Joan, she's in a cheerleader outfit, and she has like one of those horned things, those hand horn things. I don't know what they're called, but it goes, and she says something like "Merry Christmas, one and all." And then she pulls up her skirt, and it doesn't show it, thankfully, but you can hear all the diarrhea and stuff going on to the floor. And everybody's freaking out, and she's like, get the kids out of here. And the bride runs over and throws the bouquet at her face, and everybody's mad. And of course she gets arrested for public defecation, and she's doing a mugshot, and she gets let out because her lawyer comes and pays her bail. um and yeah, so then like the next day, the real Selma Hayek, the actress, is talking to her lawyer and showing her the TV show that shows Selma Hayek defecating in a church during a wedding, and Selma Hayek is freaking out and saying, look at this, look what they did to me. I'm defecating in a church. My grandmother was going to be a nun. She's going to have a heart attack. How dare they kill my abuela like this? um and and of course the lawyer has the same story. He's like, you signed this contract for them to use your likeness, and there's no way to get out of it. And she's like, yeah, but they didn't say that I could like defecate in a church. And he's like, well, actually here it says that anything up to and beyond defecation. And she's like, what? Then I'm going to sue them. And he's like, no, there's literally no way that you can sue them. And she's like, I'm going to sue you because you were supposed to protect me from stuff like this. You're fired. And she goes out. So then she and Selma Hayek ends up going to Joan's house, and Joan sees her through the window, and she freaks out, and Selma Hayek is banging on the door, and she opens it, and Selma Hayek forces her way in, and Joan's like, please don't kill me, Selma Hayek. And Selma Hayek says, you're lucky I'm a humanitarian. So so they talk about it, and of course, Selma Hayek is livid, but then Joan is like, yeah, but I didn't ask for any of this. They just took my life and ruined my job. I lost my boyfriend and my job and everything. And Selma Hayek is like, what are they paying you for it? And Joan is like, they're not paying me anything. And so they come to the realization they're both being screwed, and seems like there's nothing going to be doing it they can do about it. One unrealistic thing about this, kind of, what I was thinking of is, in our modern times, what they would have done in this situation is, Selma Hayek is a celebrity. She would have taken to Twitter or Instagram or some other social media and posted about it, and badmouthed Streamberry for this horrible thing that they were doing, and sullying her name, and like all of her fans would have like done a hashtag cancel Streamberry, and that would have been a way that she could have got back at Streamberry, but she didn't think of that. I mean, in this day and age, that would obviously be the first thing a celebrity would do, unless somehow the contract said that they couldn't, like it was an NDA or something. But I mean, they don't talk about that. But that is one slightly unrealistic thing, is that before she goes to Joan's house, she definitely would have taken to social media to try to get back at Streamberry. But anyway, so they're thinking about it, and and Joan says, I know, we'll destroy the quantum computer that makes this. And Selma Hayek is, oh yeah, are you a hacker? And Joan's like, no, I mean, let's physically destroy it. And she takes out a newspaper. And so um Mona Giovati is like the inventor. She's a woman. She invented this quantum computer thing, I guess, or she financed it, I guess. And she's like the Streamberry executive that started all this. And there's a newspaper article about it, and Joan is awful. And she said, it says here that the quantum computer is right next to her office, so we just have to get into her office. And Selma Hayek is like, we can't do that. And Joan is like, yes, we can. You're Selma Hayek. And she's like, you're right, I am Selma Hayek. So the next day, they Selma Hayek marches up to the office of Streamberry in the big skyscraper office building, and she goes up to the receptionist, and she said, I have I have an appointment with Mona Giovati. And the receptionist is like, okay, I don't see it. And she said, well, I definitely do, so you better go get her right now. And she said, okay. And then Salma Hayek says, I'm going to the bathroom. Where's the bathroom? And she said, oh, it's right over there. And she's like, oh, well, I can't use the public bathroom, because now anytime I use the public bathroom, people think I'm going to do that again, referring to the church incident. She said, so where's the private bathroom? And so she tells her where the bathroom is near Mona's office. So Selma Hayek goes up there, and then she unlocks the stairwell and lets Joan in. So Joan had gone up the stairs. And so they're both in there, and so they hide, and Mona Giovati is being interviewed by this other woman in her office. And so they listen in, and they explain all of how it works. So the computer, as she calls it, the quantum computer, simulates all of these realities. Like it uses data from our reality and simulates all these multiverse of realities so that they could make, endless content for their streaming service. It's so crazy that Netflix allowed this, because it's so satirical of Netflix as well, because Netflix is constantly trying to churn out fairly low quality content. But anyway, and she shows how not only are they making the Joan is awful, but they're going to make everybody is awful. Like it shows all these different names. Sean is awful. Elise is awful. There's like endless things. Like for all of their viewers, there's a tailor-made show for them. So they're basically making it so that you have your own personal show about your life. And Fatima is like, but why so negative? Why not, if you're making the shows for the people, why not make it a positive show about their life? And she's like, well, we discovered that people didn't believe that. Like if we embellish it to be something negative, then it keeps them like focused in horror at what they're watching, and that drives engagement. And that's like a very satirical part of our world. Like negative stuff, like especially on YouTube, you always get more views if you make a really negative thing. Good example is this series that I'm making. My first few episodes of this series were very negative, like saying that Beyond the Sea was garbage, and Macy Day was awful. Yeah, those videos have gotten a lot more views than my more positive ones. So I've definitely seen that to be true, and it just is. It's like if you make a really sensational negative thing, it's always going to get more views. Don't know why we're like that, but I mean that's the way the news has always been. News always has, if it leads, it bleeds. The news has to make something really negative, shocking, horrifying in order to get views. But anyway, so of course, like, this thing's going to take over the world because it's going to make a show for every single person. And they're listening in, and Joan says, we need to stop this. Let's go destroy that computer. And Selma Hayek agrees. And so they're looking through, and they finally find the room where the computer is, and they go in, and there's a guy guarding it. He's like this computer nerd guy that's like watching the monitors. And it's played by Michael Cera. And so they ask him about it. They're like, well, Selma Hayek is like trying to find some way into the computer because it's in like this glass case security thing. And Joan looks at the monitor that Michael Cera is at. And of course he's freaking out, and he's like, you shouldn't be in here. Well, and they're like, well, too bad. We're stopping this thing. And Joan looks at the monitors, and the monitors are showing herself doing the show. And she's like, wait, that's not the show. The show has Selma Hayek. Why is that showing myself? And Michael Cera is like, because that's the stuff that the base Joan is watching. That's the show that she's watching. She's like, the base Joan? What are you talking about? He said, there's several layers to this simulation. There's the base Joan, and then there's our fictitious layer, and then there's the fictitious layer above that. And she's like, wait, what a second, are you saying that we're in a simulation? And he's like, yeah, duh, look at my face, I'm Michael Cera. He let us rent his image for this version of the show. And it's starting to freak them out, and there's they start to go into all this crazy stuff. So basically, they're a part of the simulation. They are in the quantum computer being simulated. And Selma Hayek comes over. She's found a fire axe so that they can break in with that. And Michael Cera says something like, Selma Hayek is playing herself in this version. And Selma Hayek is like, I'm not playing myself. I am myself. And um he just keeps going on and on about all this crazy stuff. So finally Joan punches him and knocks him out, and she grabs the axe away from her and takes the key card from the Michael Cera guy, and she goes over to the case and she unlocks the case with his key card, and she goes into the quantum computer and closes the door behind her and gets ready to hit it and destroy it. And Mona Giovati and all the security team come in because they're looking for Salma Hayek because they know she's there, um and everything. So they break in, and Mona Giovati is like, no, you can't destroy that, you'll delete us, um and all of the other simulations. You'll have the blood of all of those people who think they're real on your hands. And Joan has the action. She's like, it doesn't really seem like blood to me. And she's like, yeah, and, will cease to exist. And Salma Hayek is like, oh no, maybe you better not do this. And and the really funny thing is Mona says, it's quantum computing. We barely know how it works. It's basically magic. I love that part because that's very, very satirical of how we treat quantum computing. Like, there's so many clickbait quantum computer articles that make quantum computing seem like it's a super amazing thing. It's going to revolutionize the world and make companies $90,000 a day, but it's all hype. Um, I'll put a video in a pinned comment to Sabine Hossenfelder. She is a particle physicist, and she did a really good video about the quantum hype bubble, where she explains that quantum computers really can't do hardly anything at all. We still haven't figured out any kind of a practical use for them. They're just useful theoretically. But it's really not cost effective to do anything major with them. It costs way too much to cool them. If you try to add too many qubits on, it gets too inaccurate. But yeah, I'll put a link to that. So basically, yeah, quantum computing is way overhyped. And it's so funny because she says it basically the way we treat it. She says that we barely know how it works. It's basically magic. Like, people asked, quantum computing is basically the new nuclear power. Like, people act like nuclear power and radiation is like magic, and like radiation can make a person mutate and have superpowers, like so many comic books and stuff. It's like quantum computing is like this new thing that supposedly is going to revolutionize everything, but in reality it's not anything like that. But of course, in this episode, it's simulating infinite realities of our world and everything. So anyway, Joan tries to stop herself. She's like, no, I can't. I have to do what the real Joan does, and the real Joan is going to destroy it. Here we go. And she destroys the quantum computer. And it's really cool because, like, people are shifting into different versions of themselves, played by different actors and actresses and everything. And when it's over, Joan is a completely different person. So Joan was being played by a famous actress in our world named Annie Murphy. Um, and she's no longer that person. She's kind of a more normal, ordinary, kind of homely woman. Not like ugly, but obviously you can tell she's not like a famous actress in real life, probably. She's just an ordinary looking person. And the woman who was Selma Hayek is now Annie Murphy. So in our reality, the true reality, Joan is a normal, regular person, and Annie Murphy, who is the actress who's been playing Joan, is there, and she's the famous actress that was helping her. Um, and then the security and like the real Joan is like smiling and happy, like we did it. And then the security people grab her, and the scene goes black. Um, and then it skips ahead in time a ways, and Joan, the real Joan, is with her psychiatrist, who is a different person than who they were before, because all of the people are different people in the real reality. And she's talking to her psychiatrist, but it's the same room, so you can tell it's the same psychiatrist, even though the actress is different. Um, and she talks about Joan talks about how now she's dating someone else and it's going pretty well, and she finally got her own coffee shop, and the psychiatrist asked her, do you finally feel like you're the main character of your story? And Joan says, yeah, I think I do. And then the psychiatrist asks, so you don't feel too confined? And she looks down, and on her ankle is a blinking tracking device thing. And Joan says, oh, you mean the house arrest? Yeah, there's good days and bad days. And so she leaves the psychiatrist appointment, and the credits are starting to roll at this point, but there's some more scenes where it shows her coffee shop, which is called Joan's Coffee. And Annie Murphy, the lady who played Joan for most of the show, comes in, and she also has a house arrest tracking device on her ankle. So basically, I guess they're both in house arrest because they broke and entered the Streamberry offices and destroyed the quantum computer. So they're probably waiting, and they may face jail time, but it's still a really happy ending because they're talking and they're happy, and yeah, that's basically it. That's the end of the episode. Pretty much a happy ending, other than the fact that they may face jail time after breaking and entering and destroying the probably millions of dollar quantum computer and all that. So yeah, Joan is Awful is an awesome episode. It's like one of the best episodes of Black Mirror. And I know, like I said, some people aren't going to like it because it has a happy ending, and it's comedy, and I would compare it, and people will probably compare it to the Miley Cyrus episode. It's very similar in plot and tone to the Miley Cyrus episode from a few seasons back. I liked that episode. A lot of people didn't like it because it wasn't really, the Miley Cyrus episode isn't really a comedy. There's not really much comedy in it, but it does have a happy ending, and it has a really adventurous climax part where they win at the end. And a lot of people compare it to like a Disney show or a Disney Channel movie. And Joan is Awful is kind of like that, where it has this adventurous ending where they break into the Streamberry offices and destroy the quantum computer, and then it's a happy ending. But I don't think there's anything wrong with having happy endings or adventure things. I don't think Black Mirror has to be dark. It just has to expose things that are wrong in our society and show how technology is negatively affecting our society. And Joan is Awful ticks all those boxes, and it's incredibly entertaining. Like the first time you watch it, it's so engrossing because you're like, what is going on? How are they making this show be the same as her life? And yeah, it's it's an incredible episode. I of course I give it a 10 out of 10 for Black Mirror episodes. I think it's great. And yeah, I don't think there's much else to say about it. I really like it. I think other people may not, like I said, because it's more lighthearted comedy, has a happy ending, but for me it ticks all the boxes that a Black Mirror episode should have. I really like that it talks about oh, I haven't really gone over these, is like the whole terms and conditions thing. That's a huge problem in our society, is like every few months, at the very least every year or every few months, our social media update their terms and conditions because they want to be covered for every single eventuality so that nobody can sue them and they can basically harvest all our data and do whatever they want with it. This episode was basically combining all those things together of data harvesting and user agreements, and of course, even more topical is the whole AI deep fakes thing. This episode probably started filming before the really big AI boom that we've had here in 2023, but we were already talking about deep fakes and AI generated content. Well, yeah, I don't know when they filmed this exactly, but they may have added some of the stuff about AI generated content this year. Um, but yeah, it kind of encroaches on all of the most topical things that are going on with that kind of technology. Like that's a real thing. Like already people's lives have been destroyed by deep fakes. I heard a story about a teacher who her face was deep faked on some pornography, and she lost her job because, you know, the kids found pornography with her face on it, and the parents, you know, complained about it. She got fired even though it was just deep faked, but they didn't believe her that it was deep faked. And that's going to happen more and more. There's going to be deep fakes. People are talking about how the upcoming presidential election, and it's just going to get worse and worse with all of the fake stuff out there. But I'm more worried about like that, like, you know, deep faking ordinary people. I mean, the ordinary people are usually the people that get it the worst, because and this show kind of shows it, where celebrities have more power. Like there was this one celebrity who was deep faked onto pornography, and it was a big thing, but because of her influence, she wasn't like a huge celebrity, she was like a Twitch streamer, but because of her influence, and she was able to convince her fans that it was deep faked, and they all went up against it, like, you know, hashtag cancel deep fakes or something. I don't know, I'm making up some stuff, but yeah, that was a thing where she was able to recover from it, and she didn't like get banned from Twitch or anything, because she could kind of prove it was deep faked. Because of her influence, people believed her. But, you know, an ordinary person who doesn't have any power, like a teacher who gets deep faked, can destroy their career, and they get fired, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's just like with Joan is Awful. Joan couldn't really do anything until she was able to get the attention of the celebrity, and the celebrity helped her to accomplish it. It's like it's just like that in real life. Like I don't worry so much about politicians being deep faked. Like, yeah, that might end up affecting the elections and stuff, but people are going to expose that stuff right away. It's the people, like someone could deep fake me, and I wouldn't be able like I could get banned from YouTube or something. I really shouldn't give people ideas, but that's a real danger, is really small creators. YouTube doesn't really think twice about banning them. There's been so many people that have been banned based on false rumors and stuff, or just like a mistake with the algorithm, mistakenly giving them strikes or something, and there's nothing they can do about it. If you're a really, really big YouTuber with lots of subscribers, then you can get your fans to help you get YouTube's attention, and then they'll unban you. But not if you're a really small creator. You're doomed. Yeah, I'm kind of getting off topic, but this is a really big thing, and all of the stuff in Joan is Awful is very topical and very important, like user agreements, stealing our rights basically just because we clicked accept when we started using the app, and they keep updating them every year, and they're always harvesting our data, and someday they may use our data to create content. I mean, they create, you know, recommendations to tailor content to us, but eventually, you know, with AI generation, they could be making stuff specially generated for us. But some of that could be a good thing maybe, but I don't think there's going to be anything quite like what happened in Joan is Awful, with like our life being put on TV. That's a little far-fetched, but still, the themes are very valid, and there is a lot of dangerous stuff that could come about of all the AI data and everything that's happening. Quantum computing, not so much. The quantum computing part is not a threat. I don't think quantum computing is not going to be anything really powerful anytime soon. Watch the video that I'll link of Sabine Hossenfelder. She's a particle physicist, so she knows what she's talking about. But yeah, it's a masterpiece to me because of just how much topical social commentary there is in Joan is Awful, and it's a really enjoyable episode with really funny parts and likable characters. And I really like that she becomes a much more ordinary normal person at the end. It's just it's so, yeah, it's kind of touching in a way near the end, because you're like, wow, she seems like a real person, not a dramatized version of herself, which was in the whole episode. But I could probably ramble all day about this episode, but let's leave it at that. Joan is Awful is awesome. Yeah, like on the part where Mona Giovati was showing stuff, she showed like Brian is awesome, but she was explaining like, that kind of thing wouldn't fly. It had to be negative. That's another thing is in this is, the whole point where negative content, we're always feeding on negative content, and so that creates more and more negative content. And man, like I said, I could go on all day, but anyway, 10 out of 10, awesome. Black Mirror episode for the ages. Joan is Awful, which is awesome. So that does it for my reviews of Black Mirror season 6. That's all 5 episodes, and that'll do it. So I've been Mac. Thank you for joining me for a day, and remember, everything's going to be okay.